I want to make sure that we're understanding the scriptures in the way that perhaps we haven't understood them before. And I'll bring up this quote. A friend of mine named Jim Bear Jacobs, who's a Mohican pastor in Minneapolis, he and I were in a conversation not too long ago, and we were talking about the scriptures. And he took the Bible at one point, and he held it out in front of me. He said, "Jer, can you tell me what this is?" And I said, "That, Jim, is the Bible." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You want to know what it is to me?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "This is an Indigenous manual. This is a book written by occupied and terrorized people. This is a book written by people who are familiar with life on the underside of empire. They've experienced the whips of power, the shackles of slavery. This is a manual written by occupied and oppressed people who are trying to sort out the complexity of the God life. How do we live faithfully on the underside of empire?" He said, "You want to know what you guys have done?" Pointing to me and to some of my white friends in the conversation. He said, "You have taken this book and you've brought it to the indigenous people for hundreds of years. And you've said, 'Let me tell you what this says.'" He said, "What you should have been doing is you should have been bringing this text to us, your indigenous relatives, and asking us to help you understand what it says." When he shared that with me, it completely reframed my understanding of the scriptures. You see, for those of us who are white Christians, oftentimes we see ourselves as the protagonist in the story. We resonate with the Jesus characters, or the, or the disciples, or even the Hebrews. We, in this story, in the story of the scriptures, we are not the Hebrews. We are not the disciples. In this story, we represent the oppressor. We are the Egyptian. We are the Assyrian. We are the Babylonian. We are the Roman. We are the contemporary empire. And if that's true, then it helps us reshape how we actually engage the text. It helps us understand differently that rather than being the protagonist, I might actually be the oppressor in this regard. And so I need to listen to what Jesus is saying to the oppressor, because in this space, that's more representative of me than an occupied and oppressed person. So that's helpful. That's instructive as we move toward the scriptures here. The first passage I want to raise up, I'm just going to raise up three quick passages. Psalm 139:23. This is the passage where David writes, "Search me, O God, and know my heart." And there's a Black influencer that has been really important for my formation. Her name's Kimberly Crenshaw, and she really coined the phrase, the term intersectionality, specifically talking about all of the multiple identities that of Black women, and how it makes Black women the most oppressed people group, at least in our country, if not the entire world. This concept of intersectionality is one for us to get really familiar with. She has a podcast called Intersectionality Matters that I would really endorse and encourage you to listen in on. They're doing a series through COVID called, and they're calling it Under the Black Light. And what I love about that is what they're trying to raise up is, in the midst of COVID, the reality of COVID in this pandemic is exposing the systems of whiteness. Like a black light, it's impossible for anything that's really, really white to be hidden. That's what the pandemic is doing. It's raising to the surface all of the systems and structures that have been made by whiteness, that have been used to actually oppress and crush our BIPOC relatives. That's what I think David is saying here or the psalmist is saying in Psalm 139, like, put my life under the black light. And as white siblings, put my life under the black light, and help me understand the parts of my life, faith, and leadership that whiteness has made that does not reflect the life and teachings of Jesus. And so I think one of the things that we can do as white folk is begin a process of self-analysis, self-interrogation. And I would encourage us to do this in community. And for those of you who actually have the benefit of trusting authentic relationships with some BIPOC sibling, this is the space where we get to invite those folk into helping us understand our blind spots. So a person in my life, his name is Ben McBride, and he's a pastor, freedom fighter up in Oakland. Ben is the kind of friend and brother in my life where he loves me enough to tell me the truth. He loves me enough to tell me when my whiteness is showing, when my patriarchy is showing. He challenges my natural intuition on things, and asks me where was my intuition shaped in that regard. And so I think that God actually uses this relationship with Ben to put my life under the black light and help me understand what parts of my life whiteness has made and what parts of my life the Spirit is making and remaking. And so I think that's something that we need to do, a relentless, voracious self-analysis and self-interrogation. We have to dare to allow our lives to be critiqued, our narratives to be critiqued, our faith to be critiqued. And I think for us to do that helps us move in the right direction. Second passage I want to lift up is in Mark 10. And it's one of my favorite passages in the scriptures. Is this moment when Jesus is walking into Jericho. And what we don't know is he's about to hang out with a wee little man named Zacchaeus, right? But before he gets to Zacchaeus in the sycamore tree, Jesus is entering into Jericho, and there's a blind beggar named Bartimaeus. And the indication is that Bartimaeus has been blind his entire life. And Bartimaeus, according to the scriptures, recognizes that Jesus is walking by, and he screams at the top of his lungs, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." He's doing everything he can possibly do because he senses that the person who's walking by is the only person who could actually alter his reality. And so there's a desperation that drives Bartimaeus to make an absolute fool out of himself to get the attention of the great sight healer. And of course, everybody's like, dude, don't worry about him. He's been blind forever. He probably did something wrong, or his family did. Let's move on. Jesus stops, walks toward him, and get this. Jesus, I don't know how many interactions you've had with physically blind folk, but oftentimes you can tell that folk are blind. Like physically, you can see the manifestation of blindness. But I find it interesting that when Jesus walks up to Bartimaeus, the question that he asks is, what do you want me to do for you? Which, I mean, I feel like it'd be obvious, right? If you have a blind dude who's begging, he wants to see so that it alters his life, reinstates him into community, and he can flourish better, right? But Jesus asks the question, what do you want me to do for you? And Bartimaeus' answer is, Lord, I want to see. And so for those of us who are confused, we've been groomed into blindness. The systems of that whiteness have created demand our blindness. Many of us are beginning to wake up to it. It's not just the premature extinguishing of Black lives by law enforcement in the streets. We're beginning to wake up to like the systems and structures of institutionalized racism that exist at Point Loma, that exist in your workspaces, that exist all in your cities, in your neighborhoods. It exists all around us. You're beginning to wake up. You're beginning to see it a little bit. My question is, are we as white folk willing to make a clown out of ourselves to get the attention of the sight healer? Because the good news is that Jesus healed sight before, and he continues to heal sight today. I believe that Jesus continues to pull up to us as white folk and says, hey, what do you want me to do for you? My answer daily is, Lord, I want to see. I want to see more clearly. I'm desperate to be able to see you, myself, others in the world around me more accurately. And there's all sorts of experiences that can help with that. But Spirit, I need you to be the one that continues to heal my sight. The third passage I want to lift up is that moment when Jesus crosses over the Sea of Galilee and he moves into a space with a man who's demon possessed with, quote, the legion of demons. And what I think is fascinating here is that in this interaction with this demon-possessed person, Jesus understands that legion is many. Like there are many spirits that are there are many manifestations of evil that oppress this individual. And I think that's true about whiteness. I think there are many, many, many manifestations of the demon of whiteness that oppress us, maybe even occupy us. And I think what's interesting here is in this interaction, this exorcism, this moment of liberation, Jesus asks the demon for its name, and the demon says, "My name is Legion, for I am many." And when the demon named itself, it began to lose its power. And I'm at a place right now in my journey with whiteness where I'm beginning to recognize that the power of whiteness is not just a matter of ignorance. It's not just like if I learn more, it will go away. I'm also beginning to recognize that it's not like an appendectomy that if I learn enough, then like I can carve it out and it will be gone forever. That's not the way that it works. That whiteness, rather than a matter of ignorance, is actually a demonic force. It's a power and principality And I think it's been the most significant, powerful power and principality that has roamed untamed, especially in this country for the past 400 years. I think that we need to start naming whiteness as a demon, and we need to begin figuring out what it means to become exorcised by this demon. Let's start to name it what it is: a power and a principality, believing that it will begin to lose its power. And then let's seek liberation from it. Again, recognizing that Paul writes in Ephesians 6 that the battles that we're engaging here are not against flesh and blood, they're against powers and principalities. It's not white people versus black people. There's powers and principalities in play that are duping us to engage in acts of violence and indifference for our own benefit and at the expense of others.